Well, hello and welcome to another one of my thoughts videos. In this one I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit of my thoughts, just because I can, about IQ and IQ tests and what I think of that. IQ tests are basically bogus. They don't actually measure much about intelligence at all. When they invented testing for intelligence, first off, they needed to define what intelligence really is, which they still haven't done very well. And then they started back in 1882, I think, and into the 20th century, they really developed the IQ tests, or this kind of testing, to basically try and weed out the tragically disabled people or to try and identify who needed hospital care or asylum care, as they called at the time, and not to actually test how intelligent the rest of the society is. The basic nuts and bolts of it is that you make a test to see what an average person thinks, and then find out who are not capable of coming up to even that. And that's why IQ tests were basically designed or invented to find out who needed hospital care. Then after that, the military took it on to try and weed out those who were going to be a danger to your own side in a war, those that were not of high enough ability to really figure out a war scene and not put them in the army. So that's why they basically started the IQ test. So we need to go back and look at what it actually does to figure out why it doesn't work at all. An IQ test is a conformity test to see how you conform with the block of society. It doesn't actually test intelligence. Not anybody, it's not too difficult to make an IQ test, and IQ tests are not made by genius types or very intelligent and wise people. They're made by middle of the range, slightly above maybe, of the block. Because what happens is you can write a whole series of questions, I suppose, of varying different sorts. Mathematical ones, sequence ones, logic ones, trick ones, and all sorts, a whole mixture, so that you know that some people are going to be answering them and some people aren't. And then you give it to a whole heap of people, maybe, a few thousand or 100,000, a million or whatever, and then you get your results back. And you'll find that if you have enough questions of a wide enough variety of questions, you will get a feedback of a bell curve. The information you're going to get back is basically a line here, and it's going to be a bell curve like this. And you'll find that there are a bunch of people that are not able to answer any of the questions, or very few of them that most people are able to answer. The vast majority of the people in the center here will be able to answer the majority of those questions, those mixed questions that you're given, and some will get them all right, or you'll have a tail end here. However, it's a little bit misleading. The original way of, and then of course you put the halfway mark and call it 100, and anybody that goes down lower than that is the below the 100 knows it or above. So if you've got an IQ of 100, you're basically normal. You basically think the same as everybody else. And those that go at either end, this end or the lower end, don't think the same as everybody else, because they didn't think or answer in the same way as the majority. Now, the original reason they started testing for intelligence was to find this group here who were not able to think even the same as the average sort of person, and they needed some hospital care. Now, where it falls down with the people at the other end of the scale here is that those people who answer all of the questions and get a really high score on getting so many questions right is not because they're intelligent, it's because they think the same as the people who wrote the questions. It just means that their mental processes conform with the writers of the questions. And the ones in the middle, the vast majority of people, are the ones who also thought the same as each other, but not necessarily the same as the people that wrote the questions. So the IQ is a conformity gauging tool. The ones at the very bottom are those that don't conform at all because they don't have reasoning powers sufficient to think like everybody else. The vast majority in the centre all think the same, and the ones at the top end of things think most aligned with the writers of the test. It doesn't give any idea of actual intelligence because you can make your test, and wherever it falls, if a lot of people answer most of the questions, well, you still draw that line down the centre where the major bulge is, and it scales up and down. And when they say a whole country has a higher IQ than another country, that's only because they gave the same questions to one country that may or may not apply to the other country, and so they get a variance in what the general population thinks about those questions. It has nothing to do how intelligent that population is. It's how much that particular country or population conforms with the way the writers who wrote the exam think. Now let's go back to what real intelligence is about. We have information, lots of bits of information, which actually mean nothing by themselves. We get this information from above, and we have the ability to find that information. But it's not until we put that information into some sort of order where we start to understand what these bits of information mean, like this. And that is, we have information, understanding, and then the way we apply it and make something that is recognizable or useful to us, well, that is wisdom. We have information, understanding, and wisdom. The real world works like that. We have knowledge, that's the word. Knowledge, understanding, wisdom. That is true intelligence. If you are able to gather information and gather knowledge, then if you are able to understand what that knowledge means, understand the concepts involved in that knowledge to get it into some sort of order, and then apply those concepts to your real world, that is wisdom. That is real intelligence. Now, the ones who write these IQ tests are part of the academic body, and they are ones that aren't particularly necessarily wise or intelligent. It means that they have gone through the system and conformed to the system so well that they become administrators of the system. And in using IQ tests, they're trying to find out where you fit on the scale of conformity to the systems that the society runs with. And if you fit well, then you get a certain position because you are a good little robot, and you need not actually be very intelligent. Now, the really intelligent people have problems with these IQ tests because they fall within the average bulk. They never go to the far ends because they're not down in the hospitalization guys, and they're not way up and so conformed with the writers of the academics who wrote these questions. They fall in the bunch of people in the middle who have lots of variation in why they don't answer all the questions. It's because many of the questions, sometimes depending on how you look at them, can have no answer, or they can have many answers. Pick A, B, C or D, and sometimes they want one answer, but the people who wrote the question are not that intelligent, and they actually could have an answer that both or A, B, C and D are actually true depending on how you look at the question. For example, in a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, what is the next number? They want you to say 5, because that's what the vast majority of the crowd will automatically conform to their systems to say 5, when in actual fact the real answer is any number, because 1, 2, 3, 4 does not mean that 5 has to come after it. It can be any number, but they'll mark you as wrong, and then you will not be up in the top quotient, you'll be in the middle, because you've now failed a question by answering it correctly. Or you could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what is the next number? You could say none. There are no numbers to say, because there is not enough information to give you an idea. For example, what's the next number that is an even number in ascending order? Then you could say, oh, okay, the next number is 6, not 5. Or you could say, what is the next odd number in ascending orders? But just to say what is the next number in the sequence, you don't have enough information to actually say when any number can do. So there are often many answers to the questions they ask, or no answers to the questions they ask, but they require a particular answer, and that's why you don't end up in the top. You still, as an intelligent person, ends up in the major bulk of not quite neither here nor there, because a certain number of those questions are going to be ambiguous, and you will answer them correctly and therefore be in the average block. So the whole IQ testing is seriously flawed, tells you nothing about your intelligence, but about your conformity to the way the writers of the test think or want you to think. So don't pay attention to IQ. Pay attention to knowledge, understanding, then wisdom.